What's going on in the 2026 recruiting class when it comes to Texas A&M getting players from the state of Texas? We're going to have this debate on today's episode of Locked On Aggies.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. On the show today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk a little bit about the basketball game. We just did a preview with Eric Kane of Locked On Vols, which will be a good chunk of tomorrow's episode of Locked On Aggies. But I want to talk about why one player needs to step up in particular, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about an article from ESPN that predicts the most challenging game on each top 25 team's schedule. Actually, the term they use is season-defining game. So we'll run through that. But we're going to start the show talking a little bit about something that I know everybody loves to hear about, which is recruiting. Had a conversation with Brian Smith, who hosts the Portal show now on Locked On, discussing transfer portal recruiting, high school recruiting, everything recruiting. And had a conversation with Brian, which I plan to post on Saturday as a little bonus show, about recruiting for Texas A&M. And he brought up something to me that it's so funny I hadn't noticed, but I think it sparks a great conversation. Texas A&M's 2026 class currently, according to 24/7 Sports, sits second overall. Second overall, you'll take that. Right? That's, hey, second is great. We love being it. We'd like to be in first when it comes to winning a national championship or something, but you get what I mean. In recruiting, you're happy to be there. I'm going to read you the states where each of the players currently committed to Texas A&M come from. Jordan Carter, Georgia. Aaron Gregory, Georgia. Duran Kinsler, New Jersey. Moala, the edge rusher, comes from California. Tafua, the tight end, comes from California. Then you got Kasuga, comes from Utah, same place that why am I blanking on the new wide receivers? Drum Miles. I about absolutely blanked on Drum Miles' name. Same place as Drum Miles. They both come from the same spot in Utah. So your quarterback of the future, Kasuga, comes from Utah. Trayshawn Ruffin comes from North Carolina. Madden Williams comes from California. And then your lowest rated recruit, according to 24/7 Sports, Markel Ford, is your only current commit in this 2026 class that comes from the state of Texas. So here's the discussion. Here's the conversation I want to have. And that's why, when I open the show up, that's why I said the word debate. I don't think that there's no right or wrong answer here. And I'm going to put both sides of this out there, and I want to hear y'all's thoughts. So first thing here is this. Looking at the state of Texas right now, Markel Ford is the 57th player in these rankings. When you scroll, of course, Texas A&M, knowing that you only have one player from the state of Texas committed, and he's the 57th player, you don't have a single top 50 recruit committed to you yet. I am not hitting the panic button on Texas A&M's recruiting in the state of Texas for this class. We're in it for a ton of guys. I'm not worried about it. But here's the question. I read the states where these players are coming from. A lot of California, a lot of Georgia. We got a Utah mixed in there, a New Jersey mixed in there. When you are located in one of the hotbeds of recruiting in the state of Texas, the best, it's hard to argue that it's not one of, if not the best states when it comes to recruiting in all of college, all of high school sports. Texas produces the best talent. It's just reality. California, Texas, Florida, Georgia, these states put out the best talent. But Texas is, it's a big state. There's a lot of great players there. And my concern is and I think Alabama and DeBoer have kind of worked their way into this conversation as well. But when you start to focus on going to get the California kids or going to get the New Jersey kids or the Georgia kids, those are recruiting zones. I mean, New Jersey is obviously more of a Big Ten zone. Georgia's more of a Georgia, LSU, Auburn, Alabama zone. California is more of those USC. Obviously, Texas A&M's done well in California before, but, USC, UCLA, those schools get a lot of recruits from their own state. Texas A&M, Houston, SMU, all these schools want to pull their recruits, TCU, Texas Tech, all these schools want to pull their recruits from the state of Texas. And so, I mean, I'm not panicking that we only have one player committed from the state of Texas. I'm not worried about it because we got a long way to go. I'm sure that list will be up to 7 or 8, maybe 10 in the next 5 months. But it is interesting that we are where we are. I mean, it's just interesting that is there. So I guess the question once again is this coaching staff focused too much on out-of-state players rather than going to get the guys from your own backyard? I'm not sure that I'm not there yet. I'm not saying that, but I can see how that could become a conversation if Texas A&M does not land some of these players that they want really bad. If they don't land some of these elite players they want in the state of Texas, could it be because their early eyes were moved on to other areas? Now, the other key to this is there's another school who we all, I think, agree that we dislike very much. That is one of, if not the best teams in college football right now, that is recruiting the same players you are, always. It is very rare to see a Texas kid from the state of Texas, whether he commits to Texas or A&M, that doesn't have one of those two schools in his final, 5 or 3 schools. So Texas right now, if you actually look at this list of, in the top 100 players, Texas currently has how many commits? Let's see. You've got 1, 2. So they've only got 2 current players committed from this state, which is interesting. But when you go and you scroll through, here's a player crystal ball to Florida, a player crystal ball to Texas, a player crystal ball to Texas, player crystal ball to Texas, player crystal ball to Texas. That's 5, 6, 7. Let's see, any more than that? Is that it? 7 players in the top 50 in the state are crystal ball to Texas. And I don't see a single player that is crystal balled to Texas A&M in the entire top 100. For that fact, the entire top 140. So, Texas A&M needs to get after it in their own state is kind of my point. I mean, that's the reality. You got to see them start to go and get some players from their own backyard. I want to continue to voice this. I am not concerned about it. I'm not worried about it. What I'm trying to say is that I want it to be known that if this becomes interesting, it's something we need to monitor. If Texas absolutely dominates in this state, even if, and I think the repercussions are greater than this year. Let's say that we finish with the number 2 recruiting class and Texas finishes with the number 7 recruiting class, but they have, 9 top 50 kids from the state of Texas and we only have 4. Don't think that's going to happen. But could that then lead to next year, our class is 9th, theirs is 3rd, and we get 7 top 50 kids from the state of Texas and they get 17. Like, could it snowball that way? So, I'm not saying it's a concern. I'm simply saying it's something to monitor. I mean, yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are in there for a lot of great players in the state of Texas. I'm not like, oh, we're not going to have a single player from Texas. That's not worried about it. I'm just saying, I think if the staff were to get a little bit more focused on, I think if you get a little bit more focused on the players out of state, it could affect you a little bit down the stretch. So that's why I think we need to focus on going to get the kids that fit your system and fit your program and fit your style of play from out of state, but still landing this elite talent that is in your backyard. Because once again, you are in a state where you do have incredible players in your backyard. Got an interesting article here. So, well, here, how about this? Go ahead and leave in the YouTube comments. What are y'all's thoughts on this? Am I wrong? Am I right? What do you think about it? It's an interesting conversation. Leave in the comments. How do you feel about it? Really curious. We'll have back and forth on it. We'll comment on it. Might even, snowball into another conversation. So leave your comments in there and we will discuss it. Got an article here from ESPN. This article they put out, it's a really interesting one where it talks about their way too early top 25. And then once again, the title is with games that will define each top college football team's 2025 season. The Aggies have a game that will define their season, and they lie under that category for some other teams. And we'll talk about it coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Roy. Attention, Locked On Aggies fans. The future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happened under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes they love. Now, with Roy, you get to be the best part of this change and support Texas A&M athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you to choose the player you want to support, decide how much to contribute, and receive exclusive content from the athletes. The best part, if your player transfers, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. The Roy app is giving fans control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and the future of college sports with their contributions. Download Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Texas A&M athletes the way they deserve with transparency, trust, and real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and support your favorite players. So this article from ESPN is an interesting one. So Texas A&M is listed here, and they are in the 3 spot? I lost us. I'm looking to make sure we're not in the other team's most important game. We are 22. Our season-defining game is listed as the matchup with the South Carolina Gamecocks. So the blurb says, it's a tricky schedule for Texas A&M in year 2 under Mike Elko. The Aggies' trips to Notre Dame, LSU, and Texas are daunting. And early conference visits from Auburn and Florida should give us at least some sense by mid-October of Texas A&M's legitimacy as a playoff contender. But if the Aggies are still hanging around the postseason conversation come the final month of the regular season, their date with South Carolina at Kyle Field on November 15th could be pivotal. Texas A&M posed briefly as college football playoff contender last fall before a November 2nd walloping from the Gamecocks kicked off 4 Aggie losses in the final 5 games. Sandwiched between a trip to Missouri and a November 22nd non-conference matchup with Samford, the visit from South Carolina could be the swing game on Texas A&M's 2025 calendar and a critical resume pattern before the regular season ends. The regular season finale at Texas, especially if the Aggies can score a key win at Notre Dame or LSU earlier in the fall. So, I agree there. I think that this South Carolina game, the reason that I think it's a little challenging to call this a season-defining game is because it's so deep into the year. I feel like by then, we're going to know who you are as a team. I think that those early year games against Florida, Auburn, Notre Dame is even an acceptable game to throw in this conversation. I think the reason I see those being a little bit more season defining is I think that's where we're going to find out who this team is. If we find out this team's really good, then this team's really good. Or we're going to find out that maybe this just isn't the year for Texas A&M, and then that South Carolina game is kind of just whatever, right? So I agree that is going to be an incredibly important game on this schedule for the Aggies. But I do think it's a little tough to sit and say that it is a full-on season-defining game for this team. I just think the reason I say that is I think the season will already be defined. That's kind of my point. So then this is interesting. Texas A&M is that will define each team's season. For Texas, who's ranked number 2, it says their matched up with Texas A&M is their season defining game. and Notre Dame, where their season-defining game. So that is the number 2 and the number 4 team. We are their season-defining game. And once again, it's because that's a swing game. I mean, I think there's going to be more challenging games on those schedules for each of these teams. But, these teams are both in Notre Dame and Texas, teams that people are picking them to be playoff contenders, the best teams in college basketball. So knowing that, I mean, you're going to need to beat one of those teams. I mean, if preferably not both, both of them, if you want to do something special this year. So, season defining games, I think it's a tough term to use because, I mean, it's hard to look at the way that Texas A&M, kind of the outlook for the season this year, and say to yourself, well, I don't know. It's not going to be, this game's not that important. This game is. My whole argument is I think by the time that those games come around, we are already going to know who Texas A&M is. So, and I don't even know if I agree that we're the season maybe for Notre Dame. I don't know for Texas. I mean, they have a lot of other. I mean, I hope that's the case when it comes to we want to be in their head all year, but they've got some other important games. I mean, I think we have to remember Texas A&M is capable of being a very, very good football team this year. They have a lot of great players, and they have a quarterback who is able to really take it to the next level and continue to develop. So I think it's going to be interesting. I kind of have a feeling that Florida game is going to define your season. I mean, it's that Florida game. Those of you everydayers here at Locked On Aggies know that I am a big, big believer in DJ Lagway. I think that he is going to be an absolute star this year. I mean, he's a guy that I think could seriously win the Heisman like this year. Like, I think he could find a way to win it this year. Like, I think that's how good he is. So knowing that Florida, you obviously open the year, you get started against UTSA on August 30th. You play Utah State, you play Notre Dame, you play Auburn, Mississippi State. I think that Florida game on October 11th, because Mississippi State, Auburn, I think it'll be early in the year. I mean, you should be worst case scenario 4-1 heading into that Florida game. And I mean, if you're 4-1 heading into that game with your only loss being to Notre Dame, you'll be in the same situation as last year. That would make you, if you win that one, you'll be 3-0 in SEC play. So definitely, I have concerns when it comes to the Gators coming into Kyle Field. I mean, they have good receivers around Lagway. They're going to be a good team next year. So that's a ball game that I am a tad bit worried about. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm not worried about that one. So need the Gators to not come into Kyle Field and win. Now, that South Carolina, to reiterate this point, if I move on to talk a little bit about basketball, I think that South Carolina is probably the better team. If I had to say, I think they're probably better than Florida. I think that Florida has the better quarterback. But my point, I guess, is I think that they're going to be so deep into the year at that point that our season will already be defined in a way. Obviously, there's a chance that that's a must-win game if you're trying for playoff spot, but that's my thoughts. So we're going to talk about we need a player to step up when the Aggies take on the Tennessee Volunteers on Saturday. And we're going to talk about that coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. The Texas A&M Aggies are getting ready to play host to the Tennessee Volunteers. It's a top 8 matchup. The Aggies ranked 7. The Volunteers ranked 6. ESPN's matchup predictor gives Texas A&M a 50.4% chance to win this game. Tomorrow on our episode of Locked On Aggies, pretty much the back half of the conversation, talk a little football with Eric Kane from Locked On Vols, but most of the conversations about this basketball game. And so I don't want to, we'll preview the game and sophomore tomorrow, but I mean, we need a big game from Wade Taylor. Wade Taylor had a great showing in the win over South Carolina. He was efficient, 63% from the field, 70% from 3. And then, he's been on the struggle bus at times. He shot in his last 35%, 36%, 31%, and then 29% from the field in his last few games. I mean, Wade Taylor is going, he giveth and he taketh away. He'll have a game where he gives you 22 points on 11 or on, 8 of 12 shooting. And then he'll have the game where he goes 4 of 19. And you just go, oh boy, like you are shooting this out of the game here. And I mean, the Aggies just lost a painful one on Tuesday and at Mississippi State. And now, you got to rebound. I mean, that's what the SEC is this year. You're going to lose to good teams. This conference is absolutely chopped full of incredibly gifted and talented basketball teams. So I think that what has to happen is you've got to see the Aggies bounce back, and I think they're going to be able to do that in a big way. I think that they're going to take down Tennessee. I predict them to win tomorrow when we break it down with Eric Kane. That'll be a fun show. I'm excited, looking forward to y'all listening to that. But you're in a spot. This loss puts you in a spot where right now, Tennessee's the team you're fighting with. You're right now at the 4 spot, tied with Missouri. You luckily have that W over Missouri, which is a good thing you've got going for you. You took down Missouri the other day on Saturday in a big way, pulling that win out of your out of the hat. And so you're in a spot right now where you really want to be a 2 or 3 seed in the tournament, and you want to be the second. You want to be that 4 seed in Nashville for the SEC tournament. So this game against Tennessee, I think, is a little bit going to make or break your chances of doing that. So it's a top 10 team coming to town. Reed Arena needs to be fired up. We need the best shot that we can possibly give these Tennessee Volunteers. We need some players to show up. We need a big game from Wade Taylor. We need him to have a Wade Taylor 27-point game on 11 of 15 shooting. That is what we're going to have to do to win. Tennessee, like A&M, is great defensively. It's going to be a great game. It's going to be an interesting one, back and forth, low scoring. I think the Aggies pulled out. Like I said, on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Aggies, it's a full breakdown of this game between myself and Locked On Vols host Eric Kane. Going to be a fun one there. Excited for you to listen to that great conversation. We do kind of branch off to a little bit of SEC basketball as a whole and college football kind of expansion talk a little bit. So it's a fun conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about Marcel Reed to start the show off tomorrow and then get into those topics I just brought up. Fun show. If you haven't already, that subscribe button on YouTube helps me out and helps the show out a lot. If you're listening on a podcast platform, go ahead and leave a 5-star review. All of that helps the show out a ton. I really appreciate y'all being here every single day. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll see you tomorrow, Friday, right here on Locked On Aggies.